what I used to do, because the trenbolone acetate did keep me awake the last like 4 weeks before a show. The hungrier I got, the worse it got, I think. And I just couldn't. What the problem was, I couldn't fall asleep. So what would happen is I would fall asleep at 3 a.m, and then I would want to sleep till noon the next day, which kind of screws up your day, especially if you're dieting and you got to do cardio and stuff like that. Now, when I had no responsibility and no job, that was not a problem. But as I started getting a little bit more, to do, it wasn't really functional anymore. So what I would do is I would take a little bit of Xanax. I created Species Nutrition with one mission in mind: to provide bodybuilders and serious athletes with no-nonsense supplements that work. I put my name and reputation on every bottle of Species Nutrition products. If you want to be your absolute best, join the evolution.
RX Television, RxMuscle.com. This is Ask Dave, your 30-minute question and answer show with Dave Palumbo. Of course, we have Dave back in studio, back home from the hospital. Dave, how has it been readjusting? Obviously, you did have a lot of time in the hospital, as you said, to get a lot of your work done, kind of clear your head a little bit. But what's it been like? How do you feel, first of all? How are you doing? And what's it been like, I guess, reacclimating to being at home and, resuming with your routine?
Yeah. It hasn't been too bad. I get tired during the day, so I'll do like the things I normally do, and then I have to just sit down on the couch and sometimes just close my eyes for 20 minutes, which I probably did before I had the surgery too. But I have a good excuse to do it now. It is. I tell people it feels like someone slammed you in the chest with like a sledgehammer. It's not. I don't feel the initial bruise anymore, but when I move, you feel vulnerable. You kind of if you move too much a little bit, you feel a little sore. So it sometimes, over time, it could take your energy away a little bit. But like I said, while I'm actually doing stuff, I feel okay, and I feel like myself. It's just when I'm walking around for too long. I went to the kids' soccer game yesterday, and it was like an hour and a half, and I was fine, but I was ready to get back home. After that, I was like, all right, now I need to eat and just relax a little bit. So yeah, you can't push yourself too fast. It's funny because since I had the surgery, a lot of people have contacted me and said, "Oh, I got to have an aortic valve replaced. I have to have this replaced." Like a lot of friends of mine from New York, and they're like, "How was it? I'm scared," And so once again, it goes back to the old Dave's got to go through it first, so that he can educate everyone else about what the process was like. But it's one of these things you can't speed the process up. For pretty much, it's 6 to 8 weeks to let that sternal area heal properly, because the bone has got to knit. Like the incision is closed. There's nothing to even look at anymore. As a matter of fact, I'm already putting scar tape over it so I don't get a scar there. But the internal components are still healing. So I'm taking all my vitamins and minerals, and I'm trying to eat as well as possible. And I'm taking a little BP 157 from Titan Medical to help with the healing and stuff like that. And so hopefully, in 8 weeks, I'll be ready to go back to the gym and start working out. That's what I miss the most. The problem is I have a really fast metabolism. So they want me doing cardio every day to move around, which is probably the worst thing to tell me, because I'm going upstairs, I'm going on the treadmill. I'm not doing it. I'm walking at 2.2 miles now. I'm not going fast by any means, but it's speeding my metabolism so much that I have to eat so much more food, and I'm still losing weight. So it's like my metabolism's like a catch-22. Yeah, it's good for you to get the exercise in, and it's good for my lungs and my heart and everything like that. But at the same time, it's making my body go crazy, and all I want to do is eat all day long. And so I'm trying to get my meals in, and I'm trying to make sure I don't lose too much weight, before I could actually go do some weight. Hopefully, I'm seeing the doctor on Friday. Hopefully he'll tell me I can do some leg stuff. Maybe if I can go to the gym and do some leg extensions and stuff like that. that might help at least curtail some of the weight loss, because that's the only thing really bothering me at this point. And matter of fact, I've lost so much weight that I don't even need blood pressure medication. If I take my blood pressure medication that I normally would take on a regular basis, my ACE inhibitor, I'm so low that I walk around like spaced out of my mind. So I can't even take that. So it's funny that after the surgery, I don't need blood pressure medication anymore. Go figure that one out. So,
well, I mean, now it's the road to recovery. Good to see you in good spirits, and good to have you back in your normal settings, back in the studio where you belong. Before we go to the questions, we did, want to send our thoughts out to Cedric McMillan's family. Obviously, it's been a year today that the bodybuilding world lost Cedric McMillan, and it's just one of those things where, unfortunately, we've had just so many passings in this industry, and to a point where I don't want to say you become numb to it, but it's almost as if like you've almost built an immunity to hearing this kind of news. But when we heard about Cedric McMillan, that just it was another level of hurt, because when you consider what Cedric meant to bodybuilding, and what he meant to his fans, what he meant to bodybuilding fans the world over, in terms of his charisma, his personality, his willingness to give back, obviously a military man, dedication, sacrifice, everything, all rolled up into one. He was the ultimate showman in bodybuilding, and obviously a great bodybuilder at that. So I wanted to pass my thoughts. Dave, I know obviously that was a big shock a year ago today.
Yeah. Anytime someone like that who has a bigger than life personality passes, it definitely, it hits home a little bit. And it just, makes you that much more diligent on how you, treat your health. And, I was talking to someone the other day, a friend of mine, and they're one of these people who they don't like to go to the doctor at all. They haven't probably gone in 20 years. And I'm like, what does it hurt to know what's going on in your body, so that you could preemptively, fix it if you find something, you know what I mean? I'm not telling you to walk around as like a hypochondriac, worrying about, that you're going to be sick all the time. But, diagnostic tests are so good today that it's almost irresponsible not to get them. And so, while I'm not really sure exactly what, was the cause of death of Cedric McMillan, or if it could have been prevented in any way whatsoever, at least today is a good reminder that if you haven't gotten your cardiac CT scan, if you haven't gotten your echocardiogram to check that heart, if you haven't gotten that colonoscopy, and you're over the age of, 45, 50, to check that colon, go schedule these things. They're really not, they're non-invasive in the sense that they're not like tests that require a lot on your part. Maybe the colonoscopy a little bit, because there's a little prep for it. But once you do it, you clear. Once you get the cardiac CT scan done, and your coronary arteries are open, and you don't have an enlarged aorta like me, you're good. Once you get that echocardiogram and you see your cardiac output is good, your valves are working well, you can go to the gym, and you can go about your life, and you don't have to worry that you're going to drop dead at any moment, because at least that the basics are there, they're clear. Also blood work obviously goes right up there with it, which is a lot easier. Most people do blood work, check kidney function and red blood cells, and fasting blood glucose, something you can do every morning if you want from your house, which is basically, doesn't cost anything. It takes 3 seconds. These are just things that you should be doing as you get older on a regular basis, because you just don't know. And and it's unfortunate that we all have problems that are going to rear their head at some point in our life. I hate to say it. No one's immune from it, but I'd rather know ahead of time. In other words, I fixed my aorta. I didn't have an aortic dissection in the gym and die, or almost die. I fixed, I took my thyroid gland out when I had thyroid cancer, but when it was teeny tiny, before I even, it did anything damage wise to my body, and so you have to be preemptive, because, you don't know. I mean, I know Rich Gaspari went to the doctor, got a cardiac CT scan. He had, a very high calcium score. They did an angiogram on him, and he had blockages that could have killed him within a year. He had those stents put in, and he's fine now. So you got to just be smart about how you conduct your life as you get older. You cannot assume that because when you were 20 and 30, everything was fine, it's going to be fine at 40 and 50. That's when the things start to go wrong. And I know I sound like a broken record to some people, but you know what? if every time I say it, one more person goes and gets a diagnostic test, then you know what, I'm doing my job. So take what I'm saying to heart. You know, we don't want you to be the next Cedric McMillan. We don't want to lose any more people in our industry, you know, and, you know, a lot of this is avoidable, and it's up to you guys to be proactive.
Let's go to the questions. Of course, the first two questions on the show from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. Memories working with Evan Centopani. If I'm not mistaken, he reported having a slower metabolism. What techniques, methods did you incorporate in his diet to get him ready for nationals?
Yeah, good question. These questions are from the Dave Palumbo Experience app, which is an app that I offer to the public. It's $29 a month. You can download it from your iTunes store or Android store. You get me as your personal trainer in your pocket, basically, as your coach. All my writings, all my videos I've ever done are in one place, categorized. All my diets, all my protocols are up there. Also, we do a Q&A every single week up there where it's a video like Q&A like we're doing right here, exclusive to the app. I answer everyone's questions in the app in an open forum. So everyone sees everyone's questions, everyone's answers. It's a very good learning experience. And we put up a workout every single week that you guys can follow on there. So it's a great value for $29 a month. Check it out. So this is one of the questions from one of the app members. And, you know, Evan was a guy I met in an airport in 2000, I believe it was 5. He had just won the Atlantic States, his first show he ever did. And I was like super impressed with, you know, how he looked. And we were just talking, and he was showing me pictures. I'm like, you could be a pro easily. And he said, I never used a coach or anything like that. So him and I started talking, you know, before I knew it, I was coaching him. And he had been a really heavy, when he was young, he was really heavy. He was fat, as a matter of fact. And so he got into bodybuilding because he just, you know, didn't want to be the little fat kid anymore. And so he initially did have kind of a slower metabolism. So I knew that my ketogenic diet would probably work really well on him when he was dieting down. So we used that on him for he won the junior nationals with me in 06, placed second at nationals in 06 as well. And then in 07, he won the nationals overall on a essentially ketogenic diet. You know, we carved him up and everything like that. And it worked really well. It seemed like after those two shows, his metabolism and as his muscle maturity increased and his mass increased, his metabolism improved. And that we see that a lot with people. Guys who don't have a lot of muscle or maybe had a really slow metabolism, as they've added more and more muscle and they get that muscle maturity, their metabolism does change. And he was definitely able to eat a lot more food after that. But Evan was always a very clean eater. You know, macadamia nut oil, you know, essential fats. You know, he's really big on high quality foods. And he was never an excessive carb eater. But, you know, he just micromanaged his diet so well that he just always looks great. You know, the guy is very knowledgeable now. And obviously, you know, I'm proud to even be able to say that I was, you know, in his corner at some point, helping him out and you know, being a mentor to him, as well as a lot of other guys, you know. So, you know, Evan's a success story. It just means that you're not bound by your genetics. You're not bound by how you look when you're a kid. You can change all that, but you have to be willing to do it. And you have to be willing to do the work. And Evan was. And Evan's still doing it to this day. He looks great.
Second question again from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. Do you ever use carbolyze to carb up a client before a show? If so, when do you recommend taking it? Night before, a few hours before the show? I guess if you use carbolyze in terms of a pre-show carb up, what's your methodology?
Yeah, carbolyze is my high molecular weight carbohydrate that we sell. Actually, we're out of it now, but it's a really good product. Matter of fact, Jason Arnst, who's a former IFBB pro, a good friend of mine, he used to use it all the time. He might still use it on all his clients. He used to like to carb them up with it the first day they start carbing, because to get the carbs in real fast. I sometimes will use it like if someone has to like starve themselves all day to make weight, and then, you know, we wanted the first meal in, you know, I want to get liquids and I want to get carbs into them, and carbolyze is really rapidly absorbed. So I might use it initially, but I don't usually carb people up. Like I usually like to do rice or potatoes. I feel like sometimes when you do too many liquid carbs, it can mess up the digestion a little bit. Like if you're doing it every meal and stuff like that. So maybe once for the day I'll use it, but by and far I like to carb people up on food. Also, the day of the show, you can't really drink a lot, so that you wouldn't want to use carbolyze the day of the show, just because, you know, it might be too much liquid going into your body, and it might make you hold some water because of that. But what I tell people to do is some people who have trouble with food carbing and they do better on liquids, experiment. Like if you're gonna do a show in 4 weeks, maybe do one carb up day, one like a Saturday carb up, for the next 3 weeks in a row leading up to the show, and experiment with stuff like liquid carbs and stuff like that, like carbolyze or however you want to do potatoes or rice, and see what works best for your body. I have some people that cannot eat any potatoes. They just mess their stomach up. I have other people who just can't eat rice. It messes their stomach up, and we have to only carb them on potatoes. So it really depends on the person, and that's a trial and error process, and once again, I'm constantly playing with carbs like during, the weeks leading up to the show to see how people respond, whether they do better with more, whether they do better with less, what types of carbs they do better with. And then I figure out, so by the time showtime comes around, I know exactly how to fill them up without having any issues.
Oh, here we go. Hit mute. Let's go to our Instagram questions. Again, if you're not already following us there, the handle is official_RxMuscle. If you're watching us here on YouTube for the first time, we ask that you subscribe below, hit the notification bell. If you like what you're watching, hit the like button, comment below. And as always, we're open to all of your feedback for this and all of our programming on the channel. And as always, we appreciate your support. Dedgwick, Tren Solutions.
What is that? Say that again.
Trensomnia.
Oh, like they can't sleep because of tremolo?
They can't sleep. Exactly.
Okay. All right. There's so much terminology, Sid, coming out on a regular basis. I don't even know what everyone's got abbreviations. People send me, what do you think about TRX53? I'm like, what the heck is that? I'm like, I don't even know what I have to like, thank God for Google, so I don't sound like a moron, like I don't know what's going on, but everyone abbreviates everything nowadays. And so if you're not up on the lingo, someone's going to get screwed up. What I used to do, because the trenbolone acetate did keep me awake the last like 4 weeks before a show. The hungrier I got, the worse it got, I think. And I just couldn't, the problem was I couldn't fall asleep. So what would happen is I would fall asleep at 3 a.m. and then I would want to sleep till, noon the next day, which kind of screws up your day, especially if you're dieting and you got to do cardio and stuff like that. Now, when I had no responsibility and no job, that was not a problem. But as I started getting a little bit more, to do, it wasn't really functional anymore. So what I would do is I would take a little bit of Xanax, believe it or not. And I had a doctor wrote a prescription for me. I would take a quarter of a milligram, which for most people who take Xanax on a regular basis think is a joke. But I'm telling you, you don't take it. You take the matter of fact, when I was in the hospital just this past week, when I was doing the cardiac surgery, the last probably week I was there, I was asking them for Xanax. They would give me a quarter of a milligram, and man, did I sleep well on that stuff, because what it does is it relaxes you. It's not really a knockout pill, which you don't want to take a knockout, but you want something that's going to relax you. Tren stresses you out, it creates anxiety, and that's why it's hard to fall asleep. The Xanax will just relax your body and just kind of relax your brain, really, is what it does, because it increases GABA levels in the brain. And it really helps fall asleep. Now, what I usually start with is I start guys on my Somalize product first. So 3 pills before bed, like a half hour before. Usually that works. But sometimes when you get down to the last couple of weeks, you're so wound up and the trenbolone is just really kicking your butt. You need to do something a little bit more. Like I said, a quarter of a milligram of Xanax before bed is really good. Just after the show, stop using it, because you can get addicted to it. For 3 or 4 weeks, it's not going to be a big deal, though.
Let's go to Dodd's Bra. Love the name. And this is something that I've seen at the gym as well. I don't know if it's something new or if it's just whatever. But question is, one thing I see at the gym a lot now are people holding on to the cardio machine, like incline, treadmill, stairmaster, for the whole time during their cardio session. Obviously, this takes out a lot of the effort. But in your experience, does this hinder progression with burning calories, fat loss? Now, let me, I guess, also add in that the incline that they're using is probably set to like 10, 12, or whatever. So we are talking about a steep incline. But your thoughts on, I guess, holding on like for an entire cardio session?
Well, if I was doing an incline on the treadmill or something like that, I would certainly hold on to it, because I'm very accident prone. I would definitely fall off the treadmill probably. So it's probably, if you're going to do an incline, it's probably in your best interest to hold on. To be honest with you, I don't believe in incline, walking up like a hill like that to do cardio. I think the cardio becomes too intense, and I think it's too much for your legs to handle on a regular basis. So if you're going to do cardio, I always just do it on a flat. I do 0 incline. I'll tell guys to walk at 3.2 to 3.8 miles per hour. That's a pretty nice clip. And if you're walking on a flat treadmill, you don't really have to hold on. I personally, since I've been doing cardio the last, week or two since I've been home, I do hold on most of the time because I don't want to fall. Because once again, I got a bad ankle. I have a fused ankle, so I try to do it for safety more so. But if you're in good health and your balance is good, I mean, and you're not on an incline, you don't really need to hold on. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily causing you to burn less calories. I just think it might just throw off the rhythm of what you're doing. It's more natural to just walk without holding on. But once again, if you're like me and you tend to have, be accident prone, because if you step the wrong way, and you don't hit the pad exactly right, maybe you hit the side of the treadmill, you'll go flying off that treadmill if you're not holding on. So everyone should know who the type of person they are. If you're accident prone and you lose, you kind of get lost in the cardio you're doing, hold on, or at least put a light grip on it. If it's not a big deal and you don't need to hold on, then don't hold on. So I don't think there's a negative to it. I think it's just what works and doesn't work.
Let's go to Tony Win 73. Started lifting again, age 50, not in bad condition. What would you recommend in terms of, rather he's asking, would you still do split training, chest, biceps, leg day, etc., or would you recommend circuit training? Did high intensity for years, but at this age, that work will kill me quick. So I guess he's general primer for someone who's 50 getting back into the gym. Your recommendations?
Unfortunately, I've had to go back to the gym after layoffs, recently, from 2 shoulder replacements to my ankle to now once I go back after my chest. So I'm, kind of starting from scratch too. I always go in there and break up my body parts. You know why? Because first of all, I don't go to the gym once a week. Okay. So once I go back to the gym, it's at least 3 times a week, preferably 4. 4 is my sweet spot. So if I'm going to the gym 4 times a week, I'm breaking my body part into 4 different body parts because I just know I'm going to get, number one, I can put more into my body part that I'm doing. Okay. Because I'm not having to worry about doing 3 different body parts in the same day. And I'm going to get a better workout. And then I can rest those body parts in between. So I only train each body part once a week, usually never more. Maybe once in a while I'll throw in an extra arm day if I happen to go to the gym a 5th day or something like that. But I kind of split my body into 4 parts and I try to get each part trained once a week and I divide it up that way. And so I just think that works best. And especially if you have a bodybuilding background and you've had muscle before, you'll respond better. If you have to go into the gym and try to train chest, back, biceps, arms and legs all in the same day, I don't care if you're doing a circuit or not. You can't do that more than once or twice a week or you're going to burn yourself out. So go in there, do your bodybuilding workouts, take your time. Yeah, the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks are going to suck. You're probably not going to do as much as you thought, you used to do, but do whatever you can do. Because anything you do those first couple of weeks, you're going to get a response from. Then once you get into that 4th week, you're going to be in such a groove that you're going to be able to go back and start doing things the way you used to do.
Let's go to Endomorph Boy. What are your thoughts on L-carnitine and its ability to increase androgen receptors and their sensitivity to testosterone?
I think it's one of these like mental masturbation type of study. I think there's a lot of studies out there that prove one thing or prove this thing or disprove this thing or don't prove. Someone sent me an article today saying that finasteride, they think that it might cause type 2 diabetes by decreasing insulin sensitivity over time. But they're not really sure. And when I was reading the mechanisms, they weren't sure. So I went back and I Googled the whole topic. And then 2 years ago, they came out with a study that said the opposite, that finasteride actually, they think, increased insulin sensitivity and made you less likely to get type 2 diabetes. So a lot of these studies that look at like these weird variables and go back and ask people questions about, oh, what'd you eat or what'd you take? I take them with like a grain of salt. I really don't give them any credibility. Can L-carnitine potentially upregulate androgen receptors? Maybe. Will you see any more muscle gains from it? I would bet $1 million you won't. So theoretical on paper doesn't always translate into real life action. So take that for what it's worth. If it worked that well, everyone would be using it and everyone would be raving about how great the results are combining L-carnitine with their steroid cycles, but they don't. It just doesn't happen. That's unfortunately the truth of the matter.
Let's go to Bilal Hamide. Earlier in the show, we had a question about pre-contest carbing up and whether you use carbolyze. This question specifically about the day of the show. Any food recommendations you generally make to make sure somebody doesn't go flat while on stage?
Yeah, what I think the most important thing with making sure that a person isn't like crazy super flat is the night before. So if a person the night before a show, like let's say like 8 o'clock at night, looks like they're ready to step on stage right then and there, they're dry, dried out, ripped to the bone, that's not a good sign. And I'll tell you why. Because it means that when they wake up in the morning, they're going to be too flat. So that's why usually in people like that are crazy, shredded, ripped, dry, I feed them like a burger and fries. I almost give them like a little too much. I give them a buffer. I give their body something so that even though maybe they'll even retain a little water from it, they'll really overcarb a little bit from it. They'll fill up. They'll be all veiny and stuff like that. They'll feel good. Then they go to sleep, and when they wake up in the morning and all that water comes off their body, because when you go to sleep at night, you dry out, whether you're on a diuretic or not. And then they wake up in the morning, they look perfect. So usually how you look first thing in the morning is more dictated by what you did the night before than by what you did that morning. Now, obviously, if your show is in the afternoon or, and you can get a couple meals in you, then that's great. Then I could feed a person more. Sometimes, like I have guys that have the prejudging and night show all together at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I might give them three, a pancake meal in the morning. I might give them a couple chicken meals. I might give them a burger and fries, midday, and then maybe a little fluid and some diuretic. Yeah, I could play around with things a lot more. The time schedule changes a lot. It really depends on when the person is getting on stage. The bottom line is you have to, determine how many grams of carbs to feed them per meal and how many meals to give them in the morning by how they look and how fast their metabolism is. And that's something you should already know because you've been working with them for a couple of weeks, or more. So that's usually what I tell people to eat the day of the show is dictated by, how they look, how lean they are, and what type of metabolism they have.
Let's go to Ivan Bodybuilding. Another question regarding cardio. Is there a difference, in your opinion, doing, for example, 3-hour-long cardio sessions a week versus 6 half-an-hour cardio sessions?
Everyone's a little different. I think almost daily cardio works better than overdoing it, every other day. But that's not to say that I haven't done that with certain people. Some people's bodies do better if they get a day off here and there from cardio. Some people's bodies are better if they're doing cardio every single day. So I won't say one way or another which would be better. I would say whatever works best for you. It just intuitively if you think about it, pretty easy to recover from a half-hour cardio. An hour of cardio is pretty long. So it's kind of like if I had to pick, I'd probably go with the half hour 6 days a week.
Let's go to Alexander Ruin, coach. One of my clients is not losing weight on the scale, but she lost a few sizes in her dresses clothes. Should I continue doing what I'm doing or start making changes? It's been 2 months, same weight on the scale, but 2 to 4 sizes dropped on her clothes. She looks leaner, but women only care about the scale.
Yeah, well, it's good that you're measuring her and she's seeing changes in her clothing sizes because that's a really good positive reinforcement. I always say the only scale that really matters is the mirror, or the lens of the photo that you take, your iPhone photo that you're sending me. Because if you look better and I can see changes in your physique, I don't care what the scale says. Now, I always like people to weigh themselves so I can kind of chart. A lot of times when a person first starts dieting, and especially this is the case with women a lot, I get these women who've never worked out really. They haven't eaten right ever their entire life. And I put them on a good diet. I get them in the gym. They're doing some cardio. I know they're going to gain muscle because they've never worked out before. So, of course, muscle weighs something. Now, they're losing fat. I'm speeding their metabolism, but the scale isn't moving that much, but I see changes in their physique. That's the best. You can't ask for better results than that. Gain muscle, lose fat at the same time, unheard of. It doesn't last that long. It might last 4 to 6 weeks max, and then all of a sudden we'll probably start seeing the scale coming down because you don't gain muscle forever. If you did, we would, I'd be a gazillionaire if I could sell people that plan, but it doesn't happen. You have what I call the honeymoon phase where, okay, you have never worked out. you work out the first 6 weeks and you put on a lot of muscle, and then your body kind of plateaus a little bit. So the mirror is always way more important than the scale.
Viplav Takur, a couple of weeks ago, I know you took a question regarding Boldenone, but specifically, your thoughts on Boldenone, I guess, causing kidney disease rather, or issues like enlargement of the kidneys. Your thoughts?
Boldenone is going to do nothing more to your body than any other anabolic steroid. They all work pretty much the same on the androgen receptor level. They don't really affect the kidneys. The only way anabolic steroids affect the kidneys, and there was always the old adage that Trenbolone is a kidney killer because the kidneys have to detox it. No, Trenbolone is bad for your kidneys because it raises your blood pressure a lot. So the only thing that damages the kidney tubules is high blood pressure. So you got to watch your blood pressure. So do some steroids increase blood pressure more than others? Absolutely. Trenbolone is absolutely, because it's so high in androgens, absolutely raises blood pressure more than anything. Probably Anadrol is right there, a close second to that. So kidneys are only going to be affected by drugs that increase blood pressure. So the acts to actually say that equipoise will damage your kidneys is, there's no mechanism. Tell me the mechanism by which it does that. It doesn't. It's an androgen. It's a steroidal compound. It gets broken down by the liver, and then the metabolites get flushed out. So it doesn't have any real effect on the kidneys directly. And so there's a lot of old wives' tales out there about what this drug does. This one causes hair loss. This one does. All anabolic steroids pretty much do the same thing. Some things have more side effects than other things, but there's no one steroid that does something that none of the other ones do. This one's terrible because it destroys your pancreas. No, they all are broken down by your liver. So they're all going to do the same thing to your body, essentially. Obviously the stronger ones have more potential side effects. The weaker ones like Anavar have the least side effects. And that's just the way it goes.
We'll take a couple of more questions. Zaro, I've just recovered after years of depression, taking antidepressants. Do you think I can safely do a cycle or two? If what should I use? I guess my interpretation, maybe you see it differently. I think he's looking at it from, I guess, the mental health perspective in terms of going on cycle.
Right. Now, he didn't really say whether he had a problem in the past when he took anabolics with his mental state. So I'll tell you this. I'm just going to say this from the heart. If there are people who have clinical depression out there, or mental issues, and they need to take medication to balance their brain, so to speak. And I think for those people, those medications are lifesavers, because there's nothing worse than walking around being chronically depressed all the time. I don't know. I've never been like that, but I have friends that have been like that, and it's not a fun life to live. Likewise, you don't want to be walking around manic or just being like a lunatic either. So if whatever you're doing is balancing your brain right now, and you have a fear that taking some anabolics might disrupt that balance, might not be a great idea to do them. You know what I mean? If you're that sensitive, and if you've had problems in the past. If you haven't had any problems in the past and you've never really done this and you're not really sure, you might want to try something that's not super high in androgens, because androgens are really what kind of jack up your brain. In other words, they take your emotional state that you're in and they kind of enhance it. So that's why I always said, if you're an asshole, it's like if you drink alcohol, you become a bigger asshole. It's like the same thing with steroids. If you're an asshole and you take Trenbolone, you're going to be a bigger asshole. So if you're going to take something, maybe start with something like Anavar, some Winstrol, something that's a little more mild, that's low in androgens, and see how your body tolerates that. And then if you're okay with that, maybe try to introduce, a little testosterone or something like that, and see how you feel. If all of a sudden your balance of your brain is getting off a little bit, back it off and go back to what wasn't causing any problems, because you don't want to screw yourself up if you've taken years to get yourself in the proper balance and you're feeling really good now just because you want to add a little muscle. It's not worth it.
Good one to close out the show from T. Malzahn. How did you mentally deal with not being a competitive bodybuilder when you retired? He says he appreciates knowledge. I'll expand a little bit, just as far as you go from obviously, the disciplined rigors of being a competitive bodybuilder and everything that came with it, the fame. And then one day that was no longer the case. Was it a sudden adjustment, or what steps did you have to take to really come to grasp with that?
It sounds weird, but it was almost a relief at some point because I kind of had it out of my system. You know what I mean? If you would have told me 3 years before I retired that I couldn't bodybuild anymore for whatever reason, health reasons or, otherwise, I probably would have been pretty depressed about that. But because I left on my own terms and I said, you know what? My shoulders were really hurting me at this point. I knew I couldn't get better because it wasn't that I couldn't. I was training still, even though I was in a little pain, but I knew I couldn't be better than I was. And I also knew that I wasn't able to pose the way I wanted to because my shoulders were really pained. I also was starting to get a little borderline blood pressure issue. I started taking some blood pressure meds. I said, I think the writing's on the wall. I think I was 35 at the time. I said, I never really wanted to, I never had any intention of going past 40, but at 35, I was like, you know what? I don't think if I can't be better than I was last time around, I don't want to see my placings go in the wrong direction. So I'm going to stop. And once I made that decision, it took a huge burden off me because there is a lot of pressure that you put on yourself to be your best and to beat all the guys out there and to try to get at that point, I was trying to get a pro card and just, to be a force in the bodybuilding world. And once I did that, I took that pressure off myself. It was like it unburdened me. And that was a good thing because it allowed me now to focus a lot of my energy on different things. Business, I wanted to get in. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I was still working for some supplement companies at the time. And eventually I knew I wanted to start my own company. So you can't do that while you're competing. It's too intense. You can only really focus on if you want to be a good competitor, you can't be thinking about having to run a business, while you're doing this. I mean, I used to do side stuff like coaching and guest posings, but nothing like on a regular basis where I had to go into an office, 9 to 5 and run a business. There's no way I could have done that and competed at the highest level. So for me, it was a different situation. I kind of like decided, all right, that's enough. Next stage of my life. Some guys get it cut short. They have a kidney issue or something happens. Maybe they have a heart incident or God knows, everyone's got their own little reason why they have to stop. And those people sometimes don't feel like they have closure. But I never really felt like I was going to be out of the limelight because I was still pretty big, and I was like, you know what? I'll just do things on my own terms now. I don't have to worry about judges evaluating me anymore. And so I had a different approach. And once again, I had a lot of different ideas still of things I wanted to do. So it wasn't like I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do now? I have nothing else to do. But that was my whole life competing. It wasn't. So for me, I was in a different situation. I think it's important that you have an escape plan so that when you are competing, you say to yourself, all right, I'm not ready to retire yet, but if I do retire in 2-3 years, here's where I want to do. So that when you're ready to do that, say I'm retiring or I'm done competing, you have something in mind. Don't just retire and then say, what am I going to do with myself now? Because that's when you get into trouble. So mental trouble or physical trouble. So just try to always have a game plan. And you don't have to have it completely mapped out, but kind of have a direction you want to go in when you're done. I think that's important.
That's going to do for this episode of Ask Dave. Right now on the channel, all new episodes of Heavy Muscle Radio After Hours. And then, of course, an exclusive interview with Rick Collins, truly one of the preeminent lawyers in all of, name it, steroid law, testosterone law. He broke down the fine points of the proposed TRT legislation and, kind of highlighted what a lot of inconsistencies and inaccuracies have been uttered about this topic. It's a very, very clarifying interview. Really, really worth the watch. And again, you're hearing it literally from the preeminent lawyer when it comes to all matters having to do with steroids, testosterone, and the like. Subscribe below, hit the notification bell, and as always, we appreciate all of your support. For Dave Palumbo, I'm Sadiq Faruqi. Thanks for watching.